My name is Susan Blake. I was 18 when my father stood up from the dinner table, pointed toward the door, and said just 2 words, "Get out." Not because I failed, not because I broke the rules, but because I said something he couldn't tolerate. I'm not going to college. In our house, that wasn't a decision. It was defiance. And defiance had no place in the Blake family. I grew up in Prescott, Oregon, a town where lawn signs boasted honor rolls, not kindness, where resumes were read like moral character, where children weren't raised to dream but to follow instructions. My father, Richard Blake, was a tenured political science professor at Oregon State. He wore pressed shirts even on Saturdays, corrected grammar mid-conversation, and once told me that empathy is admirable but not a substitute for logic. He spoke like every moment was a podium. My mother, Margaret Blake, was the principal at Prescott High, the only high school in town. To her, structure was salvation. She believed every mistake could be traced to a moment when someone ignored protocol. They weren't cruel, just precise, and that precision had no room for deviation. My older sister, Catherine Kate Blake, was their masterpiece. By 4, she could recite the Declaration of Independence. By 16, she'd already published a research paper in a pre-med journal. She got into Harvard Medical with a full scholarship. The night we celebrated, every relative raised a glass. My father stood and said, "This is what this country needs. Discipline, purpose, not childish distractions." He didn't look at me when he said it, but he didn't have to. I wasn't failing school. I just wasn't interested in solving equations that didn't change anything. At 12, I fixed Mrs. Granger's jammed printer for $10 and 2 movie tickets. At 15, I built a website for a local florist, and 3 days later, she got her first online order. I didn't tell my parents. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd notice the difference, that they'd see me. Instead, my mother looked at my laptop one afternoon and said, "You should be studying for the SAT. These hobbies won't get you into Columbia." My father didn't look up from his book. He just said, "If you want to be a lifetime tech support girl, keep going, but don't expect a single dime from us." I forced a smile, the kind that feels like it belongs to someone else. The one thing I was never allowed to be in that house was different. At dinner, my sister's name was repeated like a prayer. Kate's symposium, Kate's potential, Kate's future, and me. "Susan, are you retaking the math section of the SAT for the 3rd time?" The night everything broke, we were sitting at the table again. College brochures lined the placemats like silverware. Stanford, Yale, Princeton. My father had arranged them carefully. As if my life were a puzzle he'd already solved, he just needed me to fit the pieces. But my piece didn't belong. I said it gently, almost too quietly. "I'm not applying. I'm starting my own business. I already have a client, and nearly $4,000 saved." My mother's fork hit her plate. My father stood. His voice was low, precise, sharp. "That's not happening. Not under this roof." He didn't raise his hand. He didn't raise his voice. But the way he looked at me like I had said something obscene, that look would echo in me for years. I didn't cry. I stood, and I walked to my room. That night, I packed 3 suitcases. No one followed me. No one said goodbye. And for the first time in my life, I realized I could leave quietly and still never be welcomed back. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick walk-up in southeast Portland. 450 square feet, 2 windows. One heater that groaned like it resented being turned on. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I placed a folding chair under the only wall outlet and turned it into a desk. Brewed cheap coffee in a drip machine from a thrift store. 8 canned beans, boiled eggs, instant noodles, coated when the sun came up. Sent emails long after the streetlights flickered on. There were no holidays, no one checking in. Just me and a simple idea. What if I could help local artisans sell their work online? I called the site Rustic Cart. It wasn't revolutionary. No venture capital, no press, no marketing plan. Just a basic storefront builder that took 5% from every successful sale. My first 2 clients, a soap maker named Josie and a retired woodworker named Walter, who called me Lucy. He never got my name right, but he paid on time. That was enough to cover my electric bill. Every night I went to bed with my hands stiff from typing. And every morning I woke up with something louder than fear resolve. But some days fear won. I ran out of savings faster than expected. I skipped meals. Some nights I turned off the heat not because I was brave, but because the bill was due and I couldn't afford both warmth and Wi-Fi. One cold Thursday, I drove to deliver a shipment for Josie's soap stand. At the intersection of 15th and Broadway, I got rear-ended. No one was hurt, but my old Civic wheezed, then died. The repair estimate was $786. My checking account, 3 digits, 2 if you didn't count the cents. That night, I sat in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by tape rolls and printed invoices. And for the first time since I left Prescott, I asked myself the question I swore I wouldn't. Did I make a mistake? I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat there, still. The kind of still that feels like you've stopped existing even while your body keeps breathing. I found a community website listing free events. Most were workshops pop-ups or church fundraisers. Buried at the bottom was a small note, small business meetup downtown library. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. I didn't expect anything, didn't dress up, just needed to be in a room where people were still trying. Because I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep doing this alone. The meeting room at the downtown library smelled faintly of paper and burned coffee. About a dozen people had shown up, most in button-downs and denim, holding notebooks with more questions than answers. I took a seat in the back, unsure if I even belonged. At the front stood a woman in her 50s, silver hair pulled neatly into a knot. No makeup, no slideshow, just presence. Her name was Eleanor Rhodes, founder of a regional software firm called Ledgerflow. She didn't waste time with jargon. She spoke about mistakes, about starting from her garage, about what happens when no one picks up your calls for the 50th time. I didn't take notes. I just listened, closely. After the Quanda people trickled out, I stayed in my chair debating whether to leave with my silence intact. Then I walked down the aisle and almost dropped the business card I'd printed at home on recycled paper. "Hi, I'm Susan," I said. "I run a small platform called Rustic Cart. It's nothing fancy, just a place for artisans to sell online. No funding, no degree, just small revenue, real clients." Eleanor looked at me for a few seconds that felt like minutes. Then she asked, "Do you have customer data?" I blinked. "Yes, I've tracked every order since I launched." I opened my laptop, hands shaking slightly, showed her the modest dashboard, orders by zip code, repeat customers' average basket size. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. She nodded slowly. "You don't need more individual sellers. You need B2B clients." I hesitated. "You mean selling the platform itself?" "Exactly. Right now, you're selling 1 bar of soap at a time. What if you sold the system that sells all the soap?" We talked for nearly 2 hours. On the walk home, my legs still ached from the crash. But something in me had shifted. Someone had finally looked past what I didn't have and pointed to what I could become. I renamed the company the morning after I met Eleanor. Rustic Cart sounded quaint, too small, too safe. It didn't match the road I saw ahead. The new name was sharper, more certain. Craft Logic Solutions. I rewrote the entire platform from scratch, learned a new framework at night, rebuilt the back end during the day, sent cold emails to every independent retailer I could find on the West Coast. 90% never replied. A few did, just to say no. Some asked what college I'd gone to. When I said I hadn't, they stopped replying altogether. But then came one email from a regional furniture chain called Maple and Sage. 36 locations, 6 states. They were still using inventory software from the early 2000s. The message was simple. "Can your system track inventory per location? Send us a demo." I didn't sleep that week. My intern, Jared, a design student I'd met at a meetup, helped me build a working prototype in 5 days. It wasn't perfect, but it ran. It worked. It made sense. Rebecca Tran, head of operations, called me personally. "Can you deploy this in 60 days? I glanced at Jared. He gave me a thumbs up. "Yes," I said. "But I'll need to meet your tech team to integrate accounting and shipping. Where's your office?" I paused. "We're remote for now, but I can fly to Denver whenever you need." I borrowed a blazer from Eleanor, wore my only decent pair of shoes, walked into their office with a borrowed laptop and a borrowed sense of belonging. The contract closed at $420,000, $150,000 paid up front. In the taxi back to my motel, I didn't celebrate. I just sat still, backpack in my lap, staring out the window. The world hadn't changed, but mine had. From that point, Craft Logic accelerated. We signed 3 more retail chains that quarter. Hired a project manager, rented a small office in Beaverton with beige walls and a humming AC unit. I worked 12-hour days and answered every email myself. And yet, when people asked what I did, I still said I build software tools for small shops. I drove the same Subaru, ate at the same 2 diners. I didn't post anything online. I never told my parents, because I knew what they'd say. Or worse, what they wouldn't. The company kept growing, but I stayed small. I told myself it was humility, but part of me knew it was protection. It started with an article in a local newspaper. The university had eliminated several liberal arts departments due to budget cuts. My father, Richard Blake, after 28 years of teaching political science, was no longer employed. He didn't post about it, but I saw the announcement in small type wedged between an op-ed and a used car ad. A week later, I received an email to an old inbox I hadn't shut down. It was from my mother, Margaret Blake, but not sent to me. It was meant for their mortgage lender. The subject line was automatic payment overdue, 16 days. Attached was a bank statement. Their checking balance was low enough to cause a pause. One line stuck out a specialty pharmacy invoice thyroid medication nearly $1,800, the kind not covered by basic insurance. I read it twice, once for the facts, a second time for what it meant. My sister Kate had just given birth to twins Evan and Clara. In a phone call with my mother, she apparently said flatly, "I'm drowning at the hospital. I can't help. No one reached out to me." Maybe they thought I was still scraping by somewhere in a shared apartment, fixing printers and selling artisan baskets. They didn't know I had an operations team, that I flew private when needed, that my company had cleared 7 figures in revenue. They didn't know because I hadn't let them, but I knew if no one stepped in they would lose the house. So I did. I contacted my attorney Robert Kane and had him create a quiet trust called Spring Hill Holding. It looked like a community education grant. Nothing flashy, just a lifeline. Mortgage payments resumed, automatically. The bank sent a confirmation note saying an educational nonprofit had offered to back the loan due to Richard and Margaret's long-standing contributions to local schools. My parents didn't ask questions. I wasn't done. Through a shell company, Brightstone Consulting, registered in Boise, I issued a contract for Richard to write a civic education curriculum. Monthly stipend $2,000. He told his friends he was advising a state-level initiative. My mother called it a blessing from somewhere. When Kate's daycare plans for the twins fell through, I quietly arranged for 2 scholarships, $9,500 each, from the fictional Northwest Infant Potential Development Fund. She posted on Facebook in all caps, "It's a miracle. God always provides." I read the post once, didn't comment, didn't like it. Over the next 3 years, I spent more than $120,000 maintaining the stability of a family that once told me with conviction, "Don't expect a dime." They still didn't, but that didn't stop me from paying. Not because I needed to be loved, but because I remembered what it felt like to be discarded, and I wouldn't do that to anyone, even them. Thanksgiving fell on a gray, quiet Thursday. Light rain stitched the sky, and the trees outside my parents' house stood bare as if bracing for something colder than winter. I hadn't been back in over 2 years. I parked the rental car 3 houses down, walked in with a bottle of wine and a folder 40 pages thick, neatly printed, clipped at the top. Inside was every answer they never asked for. My mother, Margaret, was arranging stuffing on ceramic dishes, still moving like she was grading a classroom. My father, Richard, sat in his recliner with the business section folded across his lap. He nodded when I entered. Not a greeting, just acknowledgement. My sister Kate came down the stairs dressed like a magazine spread. Her husband, Dr. Stephen Carter, was tending to the twins Evan and Clara, whispering something about, "Let's keep them off Aunt Susan's weird laptop again." Dinner began precisely at 6. My mother toasted to health and family unity. My father stood for a brief speech about Kate's contributions to medicine, her research, her family. There was no mention of me. When the turkey was carved, I reached into my bag and placed the folder in front of them. No ceremony, just a quiet gesture. "I'd like to share something I said." Margaret frowned. Kate's lips tightened. My father didn't move. I opened to the first page. A centerfold from Tech Bridge Weekly, my photo smiling under the headline, "Susan Blake, founder and CEO of Craft Logic Solutions, the software reshaping American retail." He picked it up, flipped through like searching for fine print. "Where did you get this?" "From my own life," I said. "I've been running Craft Logic for 8 years. We operate in 3 cities. The company's currently valued at $47 million, and I've been the one behind every dollar this family's received mortgage medication scholarships your consulting job. I laid out the rest. Wire transfers from Spring Hill, the fake contract from Brightstone, the letters to Kate's daycare. Silence spread like a spill. My father stood up abruptly, his voice sharp. "You're making this up. A dropout doesn't build software empires. Don't insult our intelligence." "I stayed silent because you needed to preserve your story," I said. "But I'm done asking for space in a house that was never mine." Margaret whispered barely above a breath. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her, "because every time I tried to speak, you looked at me like I didn't belong." Kate leaned forward. "I worked 14-hour days to become a doctor, and you write code in a sweatshirt, and suddenly you're a CEO. I built this with no map. Ate dry ramen because I couldn't afford to boil water. I didn't skip the struggle. I just did it without applause." My father's hand slammed the table. "Enough. You're a fraud, a disgrace." I stood. No yelling, no tears. "You don't want the real me. You want the idea of me you can control." I gathered the folder, slipped it into my bag. Margaret's voice stopped me. "What about next month's support?" I didn't turn around. "People who see me as a disgrace," I said, "don't get to live off my money." It was still raining when I walked out, but that night, for the first time, every drop felt impossibly light. I flew out of Portland the next morning. Window seat, no farewell texts, no calls. Just the quiet, familiar ache of ending something that had long since ended. My destination was Clearwater, Florida, where 3 years earlier I'd quietly purchased a small vacation home just off the Gulf Coast. White paint, red tile roof, grapefruit trees in the back. Until now, I'd only used it for quick getaways. But this time wasn't a retreat. It was a beginning. The first week, I cleared the house top to bottom. Out went the faux antique furniture, the dusty rugs, the tired decor. I hired Elena, a local architect, to help me redesign every room. I wanted light, clean lines, quiet corners. A place where I could finally breathe. While the renovations unfolded, I made 3 calls. One to my lawyer, Robert, instructing him to formally terminate all support channels, Spring Hill Fund, Brightstone Consulting, the fabricated daycare scholarships. One to our HR lead announcing we'd be opening a Clearwater branch, and one to Rachel, our project manager in Portland, asking if she'd relocate. She said yes before I could finish the question. We leased the 9th floor of a building downtown with wide windows and ocean light flooding the floors. Jared and Dominic came too. Within weeks, we signed 3 Florida-based clients. CraftLogic didn't just survive the transition. It flourished. I no longer hid behind soft language. I no longer said I just help small shops. I was the CEO. Fully, publicly. No more double life, no more pretending. And for the first time, I didn't have to shrink so others could feel tall. One Friday evening at a Women in Tech networking event in Clearwater, I met Caleb Meyer. He was a digital consultant for nonprofits, tall, unhurried, with that kind of handshake that made you feel like you'd known him before you even spoke. We started talking about rural access to tech, then about a Thai place he liked that served steam grouper on Tuesdays. By the 3rd dinner, we weren't talking about work anymore. We walked barefoot along the beach, sharing earbuds, letting our teenage playlists fill the silence between us. I didn't have to explain what my company did. I didn't have to shrink anything to be palatable. He looked at me and said, "You're the only person I know who built a company and managed to keep it secret from the world." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it used to be true. That fall, I thought more and more about the kids like me, the ones with no degree, no support, just an idea and a pulse. Not all of them would get lucky like I did. Not all would meet a Marcia Bennett at exactly the right moment. So I founded the Forge Forward Grant, a mentorship and seed fund for non-college founders with business ideas grounded in service or utility. We didn't ask for resumes or GPAs, just a working concept and a reason why. Our launch event was small, held at the Clearwater Tech Hub under late April sun and the scent of roasted coffee from a corner stand. I stood on stage, no script, no screen, just me. "There are kids out there," I said, "who can build inventory systems at 16 and never step foot in a computer science class. If we deny them funding because they didn't get the right paper, then we're the ones lacking." Within 6 weeks, we received nearly 500 applications. The first award went to Alicia Monroe, 22 from El Paso. Her platform helped clinics manage appointments for low-income patients. On our first video call, she cried. "I didn't think anyone would pick me," she said. "The education section just says high school." I smiled. Maybe you just hadn't met the right reviewer yet. One afternoon in June, while watering the lavender by the back porch, my phone rang. It was Kate. I almost let it go to voicemail, but then I picked up. "Hi," she said. Her voice was lower. No edge. "I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry. Not performative, not forced, just soft and uncertain." "I didn't see you," she said. I stepped inside, poured a glass of water, sat at the kitchen counter. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Thanks for calling." We didn't talk long, but after that, I began replying to her messages. About the kids, their health, school photos. It wasn't a door thrown wide, just a window cracked open enough to let something in that didn't exist before. One Sunday morning, a handwritten envelope arrived in my mailbox. The sender was Richard Blake, my father. The handwriting was the same as when he used to grade essays, slanted left deliberate, pressed hard into the paper. I stood by the kitchen window and read it in full before I even sat down. I don't know where to begin. It started. So I'll be direct. I was wrong. He didn't try to decorate it. No layered justifications, no awkward metaphors. Just sentence after sentence that felt like small stones finally put down. I was wrong to think there was only one path to success. Wrong to let pride blind me. When you spoke at dinner that night, I broke not because you hurt us, but because I saw how far behind I'd fallen as your father. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I'm proud. I read it 10 times. My eyes didn't sting, but my throat tightened with something I hadn't expected, maybe not forgiveness, but a kind of quiet acknowledgement that some walls had finally cracked. I didn't call him. Not yet. But a few days later, I sent back a simple postcard from Sarasota. "Thank you for writing. I'm building the life I always dreamed of. If you'd like to be part of it, the only condition is respect." 3 weeks passed before the phone rang again. "Call from landline Salem or..." My hand hovered, almost letting it go to voicemail. But something in me shifted. I answered. It was Margaret. Her voice was soft. "Careful. Your father and I, we're planning to be in Florida next month. We were wondering if we could see you." There was no request for help, no mention of money, just a question. A question light as air but heavy as history. "In what capacity do you want to see me?" I asked. "As the daughter you once disowned or the CEO you now can't ignore as our daughter?" She said, "If you'll allow it." I didn't answer right away. I needed time not to forgive, not even to understand, but to ask myself whether there was anything left in me that still needed that kind of meeting. When I was ready, I chose the place, a small coffee shop by the shore in Clearwater, outdoor seating, quiet breeze, the kind of place where conversations feel less like confrontations and more like offerings. They arrived on time. Richard walked more slowly than I remembered. Margaret wore a beige floral dress. Her expression held less authority than it used to. We sat. The silence lingered, but it didn't threaten me like before. My father was the first to speak. "I read your interview in Founders Weekly. What you've built, it's impressive." I nodded. "Thank you." Then Margaret placed her hand on the table. "It took us a long time to see you didn't need to be anyone's version but your own." "No," I said calmly. "You don't have to say it unless it's true. I didn't come here for a speech." My mother lowered her eyes. In that rare moment, I saw her not as the gatekeeper of family standards, not the woman who once called my ambition a distraction, but simply Margaret sitting across from her grown daughter, unable to control the outcome. My father stayed quiet, then looked at me. "You once asked if I didn't see you as the pride of this family." Then what did I see? He paused. "Today I want to answer. I saw proof that I was wrong. I didn't expect that, but I didn't let it define me either." "Dad, Mom," I said, steady as breath. "I don't live for approval anymore. I didn't build Craftologic to prove anything. I built it because I needed to live truthfully, and I have every single day since I left that house." My mother didn't argue. She just nodded, not with bitterness or apology, just with recognition. We stayed a while longer, talked about the new seaside park, the weather, Kate's children, though I still wasn't ready to see them yet. When we stood to leave, she reached out and hugged me. Not tightly, not with drama, but long enough to make me feel for the first time in decades that she saw me as someone whole, not someone needing fixing. They flew back to Oregon that evening. I didn't wave, I didn't look back. I walked along the bay wind light against my skin. Then I texted Caleb I did it. He called immediately. Do what I smiled, toes in the sand. I sat with them, with no anger, no need, and still fully myself. He was quiet, then said, Then you've already won. Every Sunday now I host dinners in my backyard. One long wooden table, string lights overhead. Caleb, Jared, Rachel, founders from the Forge Forward Fund. No talk of valuations or term sheets. Just stories about building, trying, failing, trying again. There is wine, there is laughter, there is truth. I no longer carry the weight of being the disappointment, because I never was. I just didn't fit their definition, and I've stopped asking to. I forgave not because they changed, but because I needed to be free. And I stayed free by never returning to the old version of me they preferred. I still live in Clearwater. The lavender is thriving. The ocean air is gentle most days. Craft logic has grown beyond anything I imagined, and for the first time I'm not moving forward to be seen. I'm moving forward because I'm already whole.